Welcome to the channel United Emissaries of Light. If you like this near-death experience story, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Now, let's begin with the story. I was in a car accident that injured my knee when I was a teenager. As the accident was happening, time seemed to slow down, and I saw in my mind's eye flashes of the events of my past, going back to my early childhood. In those moments before the collision, I asked God to save my life and keep me from being harmed because I felt as though my life hadn't even begun, and I desired to experience a full and fulfilling life. I didn't have a happy childhood. I felt unloved and unwanted by my parents, and I didn't want to leave the world without having experienced true love. After the accident, I was to receive fixation surgery to stabilize my broken tibia. In the operating room, I was administered an anesthetic gas to render me unconscious. I thought that the gas would make me sleep and that I would dream, not knowing how anesthetics worked. Under the influence of the anesthesia, my body appeared to those around me to be unconscious, but from my point of view, however, I was still wide awake. "I'm still awake!" I screamed. Then suddenly I was very close to the ceiling, yet in that place above the focused activity below, I felt calm and peaceful. I began to hear a high-pitched noise, and suddenly I found myself in a void that was utterly black, a place that was utterly devoid of light. In that void, I realized that I didn't have a solid body, and I wondered if I was actually dreaming. I wanted to escape the darkness, but I thought it would be pointless to try and move around in that utter darkness. I wondered if I would be attacked by something, but I didn't see or sense danger in the time that I was in that void. I became increasingly uncomfortable in the darkness, but it was then that I saw a tiny point of light in the distance. Instantly, that light moved to a position directly in front of me, yet I was worried because I didn't know if the light was friendly or hostile. Then the light began to sparkle like a diamond and emit light of various colors. I realized that the light was a sentient presence as it began to call me. I could sense that the light was a benevolent entity or force, so I reached out to it to make contact with it, and when I did, I felt the most incredible love permeate my being. I reached further into the light to merge with that sweet and nurturing love that made me feel so cherished and so appreciated. I felt so safe and protected by the light that, for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to be vulnerable and to be lost in the experience of the light. I danced, celebrated, and rejoiced in the light, and for the first time in my life, I was happy. I was so happy that I never wanted to leave the light. Suddenly I saw 2 points of light approaching from afar, but as they neared, I was able to see that they were people whose bodies were made of light. As the light beings approached, I asked if they knew where my parents were. At the end of the light, they replied. Those light beings accompanied me towards the end of the light, and when I asked them what was at the end of it, they replied that I would have to go to the end to find out. I wanted to proceed forward, but I didn't want to be separated from the light and the light's love. The light beings reassured me that I wouldn't be separated from the light if I was to proceed forward. Those beings seemed honest and trustworthy to me, so I proceeded forward and passed through what felt like a doorway. On the other side of that doorway, the light shone very brightly, so much so that I wasn't able to see through it or past it, and yet that light didn't hurt my eyes. In that realm, I was able to perceive things from multiple vantage points simultaneously, including things behind me, without having to turn towards them. I was even able to watch myself, and I watched as I ascended upward towards the clouds to arrive at a place that I can only describe as a world of light. In that place, everything sparkled like diamonds. Everything there seemed to be alive and glowing with light. In that realm, every tree, plant, and flower appeared unblemished and immaculate, as nature exploded with life. I walked along a pathway there, admiring how beautiful and pristine everything appeared. I reached a junction, and when I looked to my left, I saw a building that looked to be made of clear crystal. I looked ahead of me, and I saw a few people walking towards me. I was concerned that those people might be hostile towards me, so I ran and hid behind a tall hedge of shrubs in the hope that they wouldn't notice me. I watched as those people passed by, and I was relieved that they didn't notice me. Then suddenly, I heard a voice ask me, "Are you going to stay hidden?" Oh no, I just wasn't sure about those people who were heading in my direction, so I hid, I replied, laughing nervously. "This is your home, so you're allowed to go where you please," the voice advised. "Are you saying that this place is my home?" I asked. "Yes," the voice said. I saw an area like a park with trees and flowers of every color. I ran around in the park in celebration of the joy and happiness that I was feeling at that moment. Then I caught sight of an arched bridge that spanned a small river. As I approached the bridge, I could see so many colorful flowers and shrubs on both sides of the bridge, which bordered the river. As I stood on the bridge and looked into the water, I was amazed at how incredibly beautiful and iridescent that cobalt blue water was. As I stared deep into it, I saw the earth as a beautiful blue marble in space. As I looked upon that planet in awe, I thought about the events of my life and wondered why I wasn't loved by my parents and why I was treated so harshly by them. I wondered if God truly loved me, and if He did, why didn't He think to protect me from being treated so harshly? He will, I heard a voice suddenly say in the most soothing and calming tone. That voice was so beautiful that it seemed like music to my ears. He will protect me? I asked by way of confirming what was being said. Yes, the voice confirmed, and with each articulation, I felt the weight of worry being lifted from my spirit and that feeling of heartbreak, loneliness, and isolation being cleared from my heart. I asked the voice as to why God didn't defend me, and the voice explained that those things that I experienced were only temporary. I explained to the voice that I was accused of things I didn't do, and yet no one was willing to believe my explanations. I have always believed you and believed in you, the voice replied. It made me so happy to hear for the first time someone say that they actually believed me and believed in me. I wish I was beautiful, then maybe people would love me. Everyone loves beautiful people, I said. You are beautiful inside and out. Your beauty shines forth from within, the voice replied. I was so happy to hear someone say that they found me to be beautiful, and I was overjoyed every time I heard the voice speak. If I was gifted with a talent, such as the ability to sing, my parents would love me and be proud of me, and speak to others about my talent with pride, I said pensively. You do sing well already, the voice replied. Oh my God, do you think so? I asked. Yes, I really do think so, the voice replied. I wish I was more pleasing to others, then they wouldn't be so unkind to me, I said. There is nothing wrong with just being the beautiful, sweet-hearted person that you are, the voice replied. I'm beautiful-hearted? I asked. Yes, of course you are, the voice replied. If I am, then why do my parents treat me so harshly? I asked. They were open-hearted children themselves once, and they too experienced the same or even more extreme cruelty at the hands of their parents. They are only mirroring the same relationship with you that they experience as children, the voice explained. God, however, will always love you, and there is nothing you could do to change the way God feels about you. God is your true mother and father, the voice explained. Wow, God truly loves me, I thought. If I were special like Moses or Abraham, then God would love me even more, wouldn't He? I asked. Just as a mother loves all her children regardless of who or what kind of person they are, God loves all His children, although the love of God is 1,000-fold greater than the love of an earthly mother, the voice explained. To hear that made every fiber of my being burst with love and bliss. I want to remain with you and with God forever, I said. You are with me and with God in all moments, although you may not be aware, the voice replied. I then turned to see the most beautiful man I had ever seen, and that being bore an expression of pure love, joy, and excitement. He was the most handsome-looking man with the most beautiful blue eyes, and he was young and tall, and his skin was tanned. Jesus was perfect in every sense of the word. Jesus ran to me and I to him, and when we embraced, I could feel his arms holding me so close to him. As we embraced, I got lost in his eyes and his in mine for what seemed like the longest time. So when we die, it isn't like a state of eternal sleep? I asked. No, Jesus replied while laughing at the preposterous notion. Jesus explained to me that I would live forever and that the death of the body can be likened to the shedding of a layer of old skin. Jesus explained that the place that I then found myself in was my true home and has been my home since the beginning, and that I will be there with them for all eternity. I cannot describe in words how relieved, happy, and excited I was to hear Jesus say that. I had never felt so much peace and joy until that moment. Then Jesus asked me to decide whether I wanted to stay there with them or whether I wanted to resume my corporeal existence on earth. What am I supposed to do on earth? I asked him. Just love and have fun, he replied. That's all I'm supposed to do? I asked. Yes, that's all, he replied. That's what I do already, I said. I know you do, he replied. I could feel the love emanating from him as he smiled at me, and it seemed as if he was beaming with pride. No one seems to appreciate the love that I give, I said. Truly, they do, although they may not always say so, he replied. They appreciate the love, but they don't know how to show love or express their appreciation for the love that I give to them. People are so confusing, I said. Indeed, they are. I love you, he said as he held me close. Jesus and I stared into one another's eyes lovingly. What awaits me if I go back to life on earth? I asked. Jesus told me about the animals that he prepared as gifts for me and about how much they loved me. Jesus showed me my future on earth, and it was as if I were watching a movie on a screen. I saw that I was so happy to be alive, and I saw that I was happily married. I was so surprised to see myself as a happy person because that life was such a contrast to the life I had lived prior to that moment. I saw myself as being so happy and wanting others to share in that happiness. I saw the powerful effect my words had on the lives of others when I spoke about Jesus' love, and when I saw how many people I would help discover that love and turn towards God, I knew I had to return. I was worried, however, that if I did return, I would no longer feel Jesus' love as I felt it in that moment with him. I arrived at the conclusion that I would be at peace about returning if I could be reassured that we would never be separated from him, because his love was all that I wanted. I wanted Jesus to come back with me, but the thought of him saying no to my request was overwhelming to me because I couldn't bear the thought of being separated from him. I turned towards him and looked deeply into his eyes once again. I saw that he was still smiling at me, that he never stopped smiling, and that he never took his eyes off me that whole time. I gathered my courage before asking him, "Will you come back with me?" "Of course," he replied. "I never want to be separated from you," I said as I held him tightly. I could see that he was still smiling as he looked at me with his magnificent blue eyes. We got lost in one another's gaze again as we burst with love for each other. He held my hands close to his chest as my heart overflowed with joy, love, excitement, and the feeling of being in love, and it still does to this day. Jesus explained to me that he wanted me to follow him because there was something that he wanted to show me. I agreed, and he and I walked for what seemed like a very long time. As we walked, I observed the beauty of nature around us, and every aspect of it reminded me of what a magical place it truly was. We walked till we arrived at a certain house, and Jesus, who was smiling at me with his eyes full of love for me, explained, "This is your house." I was speechless, but at that moment I was overwhelmed with the love I felt in my heart. I approached him and threw my arms around him. "Thank you" was all I could manage to say with tears in my eyes. At that moment, I asked myself if I would be happier just to remain with Jesus in heaven. I loved being there with him, and I couldn't imagine ever feeling better than I felt at that moment. We sat in the garden of the house as we gazed at each other with love and affection. Every moment was perfect with Jesus. My life couldn't be more perfect than it is right now, I was thinking when Jesus said, "I have something else to show you." We left the house and walked hand in hand, and as we walked, I couldn't take my eyes off him. We eventually reached a crystal edifice that was like a giant cathedral-style castle. Jesus opened the great doors to that edifice, and we walked into an immense hallway filled with light, and that hallway was filled with a great multitude of people, who were all smiling in the same loving way that Jesus smiled at me. "All these people love you," he said. I began to cry with happiness as I looked upon the loving eyes and expressions of those light beings who emanated the colored light that was emanated by everything in heaven. My heart was filled with love and joy as each individual's expression of love and appreciation arrived in my thoughts. I wanted to stay and spend time with each of them, but I knew that I had to leave and return to earth. I said goodbye to those people, and then Jesus and I left. "For me to return with you to earth, I will have to merge with you," he said. Then Jesus stepped into me, and we became one. I could feel him with me, and it felt as though I was looking outward with his eyes and my eyes combined. Leaving my home and heaven behind, we launched as one towards Earth, moving through space at lightning speed. As we traveled, I could feel myself becoming one with everything, such that all boundaries disappeared between myself and everything in the universe. In that experience of merging with all things, I was able to know and experience life from the vantage point of all the forms of life in the universe. As we arrived at Earth, I looked upon its beauty, but as I compared its beauty to the beauty of heaven, it was obvious to me that there was no competition. On earth, I was always aware of the separation between myself and others, which was a stark contrast to the experience of merging or making contact with the light of God's love. As we entered into the Earth's atmosphere, I could feel warm air as it surrounded me. The body gets hot, not you, Jesus reminded me. We flew into the sea, and I wondered why I didn't experience the usual sensation of being wet. Your body gets wet, not you, Jesus said. I looked at my body at the hospital before reuniting with it, and it occurred to me how restrictive that body was. I didn't experience any attachment or sentimentality to that form, and at that moment, it seemed somewhat repulsive. Guided by Jesus, I slipped into my body via the sternum. Initially, it felt as if I was fitting into something that was very distinct from me. I then began to hear people's voices as those people attempted to revive me. It will take just a moment to reconnect with your body, Jesus advised. Can I have some water? I asked. Not yet, but we will bring you ice chips, the doctor replied. I was looking around for Jesus, yet I wasn't able to find him. I know that we will be reunited one day. My life was completely changed after my NDE, and I was and am forever changed by Jesus' love.